Bonjour, Montréal. Comment ça va? Bon. And that is as far as my school French will take us. So instead, I'd like you to sit back and relax. And then imagine, just for a moment, that I walked into your organizations and I asked every single one of you, everyone in your organization, to get into small cross-functional teams of their choosing. I'd ask everyone to pick their own team, to decide who they want to work with and what they want to work on. What do you think is going to happen? Think about it. Do you think it's going to be totally smooth sailing? You got this? People would just figure out which were the best teams for the company. They'd happily get into teams and just sort it out. Is that what would happen? Or do you think it's going to be chaos? Absolute chaos. People would get into fights. There'd be teams nobody wanted to be in, empty teams. Or there'd be other teams where everyone just wanted to be. What about people? What do you think happened to people? Do you think there'd be fights? Do you think there'd be a bit like in the old schoolyard? There'd be this kid in the corner that nobody wanted to play with? Someone who just doesn't get picked? Let's do a show of hands. If you think this is going to work in your organization, raise your hand. It's about 10%. If you think this is never going to work in your company, raise your hand. Thanks. So it's about 80% of you. But the main question is, why would you even want to do this? I mean, isn't it just a really risky, complicated way to get into teams? Sounds crazy to me. What problem are we actually solving? What we want is this. Happy teams that are high performing. We know that in our world that's getting more complex, that's more ambiguous, that's getting more uncertain, the best work is done in teams, small cross-functional teams. And teams are made up of people. Highly motivated, engaged people. And we also know what motivates people. We know this because Daniel Pink told us. Daniel Pink told us that it's about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Purpose? That's the companies we work for. That's what we sign up to, what gets us out of bed. Mastery? We got that covered. It's the people we hire. They're skilled, they're responsible. We got this. Yes, we give them place to learn and opportunity to develop. But we got it covered by hiring the right people. Which leaves us with autonomy. And that's where self-selection comes in. I mean, what could be more in line with autonomy than letting people choose who they want to work with and what they want to work on? But that is quite a claim to make. And 80% of you just told me that you don't believe it would be possible in your organizations. So let me take you back in time to 2013, when we did just that at a New Zealand e-commerce company called TradeMe. TradeMe enabled 450 people to self-select into small cross-functional teams. More than 200 people in one location, in the same room, at the same time, and it worked. And you might think this was a one-off. It's just me telling some story, and we did it once and never again. This has been done all over the world, again and again. In over 15 countries, more than 50 companies, and more than 5,000 people have been affected. And I know this because I wrote a book. This is what it looks like when the publisher sends you your book, by the way. I know this because we wrote a book, and when you write a book, then people do what you suggest them to do. They follow the instructions, and they do their own self-selections. And then they send you emails. They tell you their stories. They tell you all the things that worked for them and didn't work for them. So you end up with lots and lots of data. But back to 2013, Trade Me. Trade Me is New Zealand's version of eBay. They sell everything. Grandmother's old furniture, property, houses, cars, motorboats, have job ads, everything. They have 3.4 million member accounts, which tells me, are there any New Zealanders in the room? Anyone who's lived in New Zealand? No. Because if you had, I would know for a fact that you knew Trade Me. And I know that for a fact because of the 3.4 million accounts that we have in a population of 5 million. We've got 700,000 unique visitors each day, and Trade Me are responsible for 2/3 of New Zealand's domestic internet traffic. Think about that. I can't believe anyone's ever getting any work done in New Zealand. Apparently we do. We also have 10,000 images a second, do 20,000 database transactions, and view 450 auctions. Each month, we send 80 million emails, serve 1.3 billion pages, and sell 3,000 chickens. So Trade Me is a New Zealand success story. Trade Me is an iconic company in New Zealand. And it's very successful. Everyone knows Trade Me. And what comes with success is that you've got lots and lots and lots of work to do. And when you've got lots of work to do, you hire more people to do that work. So you grow. Trade Me grew from 50 to 450 people within 3 years. And while that's a privilege and awesome and really, really cool, it also comes with growing pain. Does that sound familiar? It comes with pain where I remember going to work, and each week I'd meet 4 to 5 people I'd never seen before in my life, didn't even know their names. And it also came with the pain of making things really hard. We're still deploying twice a day, but we started to get in trouble with the bigger stuff. Our projects would be stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. There'd be a designer pulling a project off the shelf, giving it to the developer, then no tester was around, so the designer took the next project and waiting for a developer. Developer had nothing to do, but we don't have a tester, so all the projects were basically waiting for each other. And we had, in short, created this, a big mess. We weren't really sure who exactly was working on which project and when. And we couldn't really tell any particular project or thing. Was anyone actually working on it? Or were they just waiting for it to be unblocked? I remember the head of motors walking past saying, "Hey, where's my project at?" And we'd look at each other, giggle nervously, say, "What project?" So it felt a bit like this giga-enormous tower of Jenga, where we hired more people and then we put them on the top of that tower, and it got more and more unstable. And we're really worried that this tower will collapse at any time. So we knew we needed to do something, and we also had an inkling about what we needed to do. We had 450 people, which meant 450 moving parts. So we wanted to have fewer parts, take out the complexity, and instead of doing individual resourcing, have small, stable-ish teams, way fewer moving parts. And it wasn't just our gut feeling. It was also based on research. There's research done by RallyDev that shows that stable teams are 60% more productive than teams that just get together for a project, especially by you selection method. And teams that just get together for a project and then get disbanded again. So we knew this is what we wanted. We really wanted to have teams, which means we needed to figure out how to make those teams. And let me just throw one more piece of research at you. That's research done by J. Richard Hackman. He looked into non-technical teams. And he looked at the factors that influence performance. And what he found out, looking at more than 10,000 teams, what he found out was that 60% of performance is dependent on team design. Design, that's the size of the team, the skills of the team, the people on the team, the skills and the diversity. So this is hugely important. And because it's so important, what do? We do this as managers. Who of you is in a management role? 40% maybe? Yes, this is so important. So us as the top dogs, we as the people with the overview, who can see all the parts, the people who have the big picture view and want the best for everyone else. We should certainly do this. This is my dog Luca, who manages me. And we're doing exactly that, because that's what we're supposed to do. And I remember being in all those meetings, being in meetings with the leadership team. And we'd take people and we'd move them around and go, this person goes here, and that person goes here, and that person over there. And we'd take this big picture and the big puzzle and go, nailed it. So we nailed it, and we walked out and we taught the people. And we'd walk up to George and go, hey, George, you're going to be on this team. And George turned around and went, It's not what I wanted to do. I also don't really want to work with that other guy. And we got confused and went, okay, slight mistake. Back to the drawing board. So George goes here, and Paul goes here, and Mary over there, and we reshuffled, and out again we went. And so, hey, George. And somehow we just didn't get it right. We didn't get it right, and we didn't really know why. We just had an inkling, this is not working. Even though we thought we were doing a good job, we actually weren't. And while we're there, and we were still scratching our heads, having an idea that this is not really what we want to do, this is not right, we had a hackathon. Remember, it's 2013. It's my very first hackathon. And it was amazing. I'd never done this before, and I saw people get into small teams and were doing projects, and they were really joyful, and they were passionate, and they loved what they were doing. And they also got stuff out. It was really playful and cool to be at work. And I remember I raced home and I sat down in front of my computer and I wanted to blog about it. And I wrote a blog post and said, this is amazing. And I ended with the sentence, it's just a shame that work can't always be like this. And then he hit me. And I went, whoa, whoa, who says? Who says that work can't always be like this? And I thought, well, maybe this is something that we could do. So I raced back to work the day after, and I went to the head of the PMO, David. And I went, David, this is what we got to do. And David turned around, looked at me, and said, sure, good idea. And I thought, whoa. I hadn't been really sure, but he thinks it's a good idea. So obviously it's a good idea. I've got to do this. I've got a partner in crime. It was only years later that David told me he didn't believe in the idea for a second. Just thought, I'll just say yes, and she'll forget about it. She'll go away. Not a big deal. But I thought, boom, got a partner in crime now. And he couldn't really back out of it anymore. So we knew that we needed to make this happen. And it didn't seem like such a big deal, because surely someone had done this before. And we did what every intelligent, sane person would do. What would you do? Yep. Boom. You'd Google it. So we typed in team self-selection and expectantly hit enter. Have you ever seen an empty search results page? So we realized no one seemed to have done this before at this scale. And if they had, well, they hadn't published how they had done it or the results, so it was useless to us. And we knew we were on our own, and if you have something that no one has done before, there are two options. One, you're onto something really, really cool, borderline genius, I'd say. Or, option two, you're batshit insane. This is never going to work. To be honest, we really didn't know which one it was. But now, we had said that we were going to do this. And we knew it was the right thing to do, but we did feel fear. Because remember, this is one of the most successful New Zealand companies that we're playing with. We're basically fundamentally playing with fire. It's the kind of company where if you bring down the site for 10 minutes, you're on the front page of the newspaper. Remember, 2/3 of New Zealand's internet traffic? So we were really worried, but we also knew this was the right thing to do. And what do we do when we have like a big, big, big scary thing as agile people? We scale it down. We run an experiment. So that's exactly what we did. We went to one of our 3 cities where Trade Me have offices, Auckland, the smallest office of them all, 20, 25 people, and we designed a self-selection experiment with only 20 people. And guess what happened? It worked. It worked. We ended up with 4 fully formed teams that could deliver to their purpose. And the process, people enjoyed it. There were no fights. All of the fears that we had of empty squads, of squads that everyone wanted to be in, people not getting picked, did not happen. So that was super encouraging. And we knew we had now done it on a small scale. We were ready to find a way to flip the switch and give all 450 people the opportunity to choose their own teams. And this is how we did it. First of all, we had to get away with it. You don't just rock up to management and go, hey, I've got this idea. We think it's really cool. Nobody's tried it before. We've no idea if it's going to work. Good to go? happy to go. Not happening. So we didn't exactly ask for permission. We also weren't cowboys about it. We didn't do anything in secrecy. We just made sure that every step along the way, we communicated, almost over-communicated. We're fully transparent every step along the way. But we didn't ever put it up for discussion about whether we should or should not do it. Just informed people. And nobody stopped us. But it's not just management, it's also all the people who are affected. Because this is actually not an easy thing to do. Just imagine if this is you. What would you be concerned about? It's pretty scary for people because we all think, what if I get this wrong? What if I put myself into the wrong team? What if I sign away my life? And also, as a group of people, management has just placed trust in us. They just told us that they believed we could do this. What if we stuff this up? So we communicated with everyone a lot. We had big company presentations, we had small group presentations, we had small group conversations, we had one-on-one conversations, and we took all those fears and hopes and dreams really, really seriously. And we wrote them down in an FAQ so that everyone could follow and read up on what would happen on that day. And we also found out that every single self-selection I've ever done, people go through the same stages. Even we went through the same stages. It's a bit like there are stages of grief. You know them? A bit like there are stages of grief, there are stages of acceptance of self-selection. And it starts out with the status quo. And then someone comes and tells, hey, let's do self-selection. And everyone goes, whoa. Yeah, nah, no, it's never going to work. And then they go into denial, a bit like David went. Sure, it'll go away. And people think, well, okay, maybe, potentially, could happen, to immediately make a step back again. What if people get into fights? What if there's some kit that's not going to be picked? What if there are empty squads? What if there are really uncomfortable areas that nobody wants to work in? What if, what if, what if, what if? And then they go to, well, what if we can actually make this work? What if we end up with small teams where every single person who's on that team wants to be on that team and is there because they have chosen to be there? And from there, people go, okay, let's give this a crack. Let's try this. So with all this in place, we were good to get started with our preparation. First thing that we needed to do was to actually define the end state. Where do we want to end up with? We needed to define the teams we wanted to have. And not just project teams, but teams that would last longer, teams that had a mission and a vision and a purpose. We had teams, for example, the fashion selling squad. Their job was to make the best experience for people to sell fashion on Trade Me. Each squad had a mission that was bigger than just the next project. And we also knew we needed to have a really good facilitation plan, because we knew we couldn't just get 200 people in a room, shout, go, and hope for the best. This is literally us looking across the harbour with a very blank piece of paper. And we were trying to come up with a plan for the day, with a good facilitation plan that would make it possible for people to select their teams. And here's what we came up with. At its very core, we wanted to have iterations. We wanted to put a time on the wall, shout, go. People would pick the teams that they wanted to be in, and then have a check-in, and either the problem be solved and we're done, or we would have another round and iterate over the result, again and again. We also gave people instructions around what the end state for the team was going to be, basically a definition of done for the team. They needed to be able to deliver to purpose. We wanted them to be small, 3 to 7 people. And also we wanted them to be co-located in the same city. I know that people do self-selections when they're virtual teams and not co-located. But for us at the time, we were lucky. We could have fully formed teams in each of the locations where we had offices. Because we really didn't want to have the BA in City 1, the developer in City 2, and the tester in City 3. And then we got really close to the day. We had all our permissions in place, people were prepared, everyone had an invite, and the day before, we had something that resembles Arts and Crafts Day. This is literally our head of development cutting out 200 photos of people. And we had team sheets where people were supposed to place the photos in. It looks like it's just a piece of paper, and it kind of is. But there's some thought that went into it, because you can't get more than 7 photos into each of those sheets. There's also a guy that's sellotaped to the sheet. That's the product owner. And we decided to have the product owners pre-selected because TradeMe is very, very broad in what they do. And it's very unlikely that when you hire someone who knows about the property market, that they also know a lot about cars or boats. So those guys were pre-selected, but those were also the only people who were pre-selected. Everyone else self-selected on the day. And we got all the visuals in place so that people could signal to the room which skills they could cover in their squads. And then we made sure to set up the room. It's actually hugely important. And it looked something like this, with a big countdown timer on the wall, the squad diagrams everywhere, making sure that they were far enough from each other so that when people chose their team, they could physically move there, and all the rules and constraints. This is what it looked like in real life. The chairs, by the way, we removed for the self-selection. This was only for the introduction and product owner pitches. So on the big day, we had everything ready. And we welcomed people, and the first thing we asked them to do was go to a big table, find their photo, and pick it up. Because we wanted them to be involved from the very, very first second. And then we started with the product owner presentations, because people need to have a chance to know what is the team they're actually signing up for. And it sounds something like that. Hi, I'm Marcus from the Fashion Squad. Our job in life is to make the fashion buying experience on TradeMe absolutely amazing. What's coming up is we're going to change the categories, we're going to improve search, and we're also thinking about adding new goods to the site. Not individual projects, but a rough direction of what's coming up so that people can make an informed choice. And all of this happened against a backdrop of a big banner, which was do what's best for TradeMe. And it worked really, really well, because we want to remind people that this is not just for them to choose what they wanted to do, it's part of it, but also that we were trusting them to solve this big puzzle and come up with teams that were the right teams for the company and could deliver to our strategy and to our purpose. We gave people instructions or a bit of guideline for how to choose a team. It was basically, what can I teach? What can I learn? And is this fair to my company? With all of this, we're ready to go. We put the timer on the wall, 10 minutes, we shouted go, and off we went. And then, what happened next is this. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. People stand around look at their photos, go, nobody moves. It's really awkward. I was thinking at the time, I'm actually really happy I've got an Austrian passport in my back pocket. Worst case, just run away. But 2 or 3 minutes later, the room started to look like this. People started moving around, people started having conversations. People started discussing where they wanted to be. They started negotiating, they started seeing the bigger picture. Like, if I go here and you go over there, what would happen to that other squad here? So we're starting to have real conversations, which was really, really cool. So if you ever do that, and the first 2 minutes nothing happens, don't worry about it. It will be okay. And after 10 minutes, we'd stop the clock, and we'd go a round robin for every single squad. And one person from each squad would give a status. It'd be like, hi, I'm Matt from the buyer squad. We got 7 testers and nothing else. We need developers, and we also need UX. And every single team would do that and basically give information to the room, visually and by telling people what they were lacking and what they had enough of. So we iterated, and things got better and better and better. But it still is interesting what happens every single time that I've done a self-selection. The very first round, disaster. That's when you see those teams with 7 developers and nothing else, 4 testers, 1 developer. Round 2, there's improvement. You see the first few teams that are actually well formed. And round 3, that's when stuff starts to happen. Good stuff starts to happen. That's when people start having those real conversations. Product owners repitch, people discuss how they can solve the bigger problem. So from round 3 on, things go really well if you have a big room of people. Still is the question, when do you actually stop? And the obvious time to stop is when you've solved the problem. You have all your squads. But more often than not, imagine you're like 150, 200 people in a room. More often than not, you have to stop when the room looks like this. People are looking at their phones, they're thinking about their coffees, they're talking about the weather, they're basically checked out. So if you do another round here, nothing's going to happen. It's happened for us. We had 11 out of the 16 teams we wanted to have. And we knew any additional iterations wouldn't help. So we sent people who were in the 11 well-formed squads or teams back to the office to get on with the day and kept the other 20 people with us and did a very last round. The really important thing about those last people is to make sure that nobody there has been left over because there's some kind of a doofus that nobody wants to work with. Those are not the kids who didn't get picked. This is something that is bound to happen. Because you've got 200 people, you get into teams, it'd be a miracle and too much of a coincidence. If you just had the right number of people and skills evenly distributed, it's not going to happen. So we had the last people, and we had conversations with them. And it's a lot easier if you're only 20 people in the room. Did a last round, and we got 15 out of 16 teams. That was great. But what about the last team? They weren't fully formed, and we still wanted to honor the spirit of self-selection. So we introduced imaginary friends. Imaginary friends are friends who don't exist just yet. So those guys got the right to hire into their squad the last people they were missing. They had the right to decide who this was going to be, and in the spirit of self-selection, they could choose someone, anyone from outside the company. So was it a success? Hell yes. But I'm not the right person to ask. We should ask the people who took part in this experiment. And we asked people what they thought about the experience. And we found out, first of all, they liked the process. They liked where they ended up, and they also mostly work in a team they expected. What was interesting was that when we asked all the people, like 30 and older, they were way more appreciative of self-selection than younger people. And I believe that's because they have experience, and they have experience that they have been put into teams and have been unhappy with those teams. So they were hugely appreciative and loved it. Graduates, on the other hand, they liked the experience, but thought it was completely normal. How else would you do it? Everyone does it like that. And in a way, I think it should be like that, but also it was like that 10 or 5 years from now. We also asked management what they thought about self-selection. And they said we learned that we can trust people. And that's actually huge. It's a huge, big deal. It's a task that we as management were trying to do, and we didn't get it right. So we asked people to do it for us and come up with a better solution. And they did. That's actually a huge element of trust that we gave them, and they proved that they deserved it. We also found out what to hire for. We had lots of job ads because we desperately thought we needed back-end developers. We were doing interviews with back-end developers, only to find out for self-selection, really what we needed were designers. So that was really good knowledge to find out. And we managed to change what we were hiring for. We also found out there were some areas that were not very attractive to people. You know what? That was actually good, because it wasn't self-selection that made them unattractive. We just found out, it surfaced information so we could fix it. And that was a really cool thing to find out. And because this has been done now in many, many countries, in many companies, there are things that are going again and again and again that are universal. And the first thing is that self-selection is all about relationships. We ask people after each self-selection, why did you choose the team that you chose? You did what's best for your company? You chose the area you wanted to work in? You chose who you wanted to work with? Or you chose who you did not want to work with? About 80 to 90% of people say, I did what's best for the company, and I chose the area I wanted to work in. I tell you what, it's a big lie. It's a huge, big lie, and for some reason, people think they can't admit the relationship part. It's so totally not what we observe in the rooms. We can see this is not what people do. And we can also see when we have large-scale self-selection events. We've got those 150, 200 people. There's no way that no one is sick or on a holiday that you really get them all in a room. So what we do is we give them the right to choose a proxy. So they have the right to give the photo to someone else, and that person is making a choice on their behalf. Every single time we've done this, the instructions to the proxy were, whatever you do, I don't really care what team it is, but whatever you do, take me with you. And we also had what I call the Dutch issue. It's called the Dutch issue because two people happen to be Dutch. And those people really did not want to work with each other. We actually didn't know this. I think no one was really aware of that. And whenever the first person went to a squad, a team, and the second person followed into the same team. Person number one, take the photo, put it somewhere else. And if they ended up in the same squad again, well, the other person would move their photo, and so on. And you know what? Not a problem. No drama whatsoever. You've got two people in a company who don't like to work with each other. So what? They shouldn't have to. It was no drama, they just chose not to be in the same team. And traveling around and talking to people also made me realize that everyone has the same questions. Have a read. If you've got at least one of those questions, please raise your hand. Thanks. That's almost everyone, I'd say. So I'm going to answer those questions to the best of my ability. So are people going to start arguing and bitching? Are people going to get into fights? No, they don't. They don't, because when we treat them like responsible adults, they actually act like responsible adults. Doesn't mean that everyone's nicey all the time. People have robust conversations. There is some conflict. But when we have conflict in our lives, we can actually talk about it and we can usually resolve it. So people can also during self-selection. Isn't there some poor person who's like totally not going to be picked, the schoolyard situation where you just stand there and you hope that someone would go and say your name? Also, does not happen. And it doesn't happen because no one is getting picked. It's the opposite. The process makes sure that people put their photo into the squad they want to be in. Nobody's picking them. And we even take care of people who don't know what to do or where to go, maybe because they're in day 2 in a company. We have a big sign which is called "Not in a Team." And that means I can put my photo there, and that means people should come and approach me and have a conversation with me. So there's no picking whatsoever going on. Can you please make sure that we have enough junior and senior developers? Can you make sure there's enough domain knowledge, that it's not just all new people? Should we have some rules and constraints around that? No. No, no, no. And the reason I feel so strongly about this is that it just introduces complexity again. It moves us closer to management selection again. It's not what we want. And I promise you, you will overlook solutions that people come up with that you wouldn't have come up with yourself, and yet you wouldn't come up if you have all those additional constraints. Trust people to get this right. They will. And aren't there going to be some really unpopular areas? Yep. Totally. But wouldn't you rather want to know? We had an area nobody wanted to work in, and it turned out it was a manager people hated working with. And we became aware of it, and we could actually do something about it. I also had another time when there was a squad nobody wanted to be in. We had this empty team or squad sheet, not a single photo in it. And it made us realize, well, maybe we shouldn't have that team. Actually, having that team was a really stupid idea in the first place. So we realized that and just didn't have that team. And how do you convince management? It's actually not that hard. I've done some of the work for you. Like, we had to go ahead and not ask for permission because nobody had done this before. But now, there's enough data to prove that this actually works. We know this works. And we can also have the conversation around, just imagine if you had those teams and they were all engaged because they had put themselves into those teams. And even if there was someone who didn't really want to be in a particular team, they wouldn't come whinging to you as a manager because they put themselves there, so they wouldn't complain to you. Also, they usually make it work, because if you put yourself on a team, then they put in the effort to build great teams. And the other thing that I'm working with is risk. What's the worst case scenario here? Worst case, it just explodes. It doesn't work. Get it all wrong. But if it blows up and doesn't work, you can still go back to what you've always done. Management selection. Worst case, you lose a day worth of work. And by the way, people don't get it entirely right. But neither would you as management. And really, it's low risk. So 6 years later, TradeMe have grown even more. There are more than 55 teams. All of those have been self-selected. For all of those, people have had the choice which team to work with. And we asked people about engagement, about autonomy, about mastery, and about purpose. So we actually looked at the trends for engagement, and it turned out that all the curves and all the trends are pointing upwards. People are more engaged when they get to choose who they work with. It has also been hugely beneficial for TradeMe as an employment brand. I assume it's probably the same in Canada, but there are not enough people to go around. Everyone is trying to hire people. So as an employment brand, this was great. People wanted to come and work with TradeMe. People join TradeMe because they hear they can pick their own team. However, can you spot what's wrong here? The thing that's wrong here is if you join after self-selection, you don't get to choose. So that doesn't really work out that well. So what we did about that is that we self-select every 6 months. Every 6 months, everyone gets the opportunity to choose the team they want to work in. And I know what you're thinking. Thinking, oh, didn't you just tell us 45 minutes ago that stable teams are really, really good and we need to keep them together, so how does this work? Well, a self-selection doesn't make everyone move. It just gives everyone the opportunity to move. In my experience, most people actually don't move after the first self-selection. It is not disruptive. Most people want to stay where they are because they love what they work on and they love their teammates. You get some people moving around, which is a good impulse if you've got 1 or 2 people moving around, but you never, ever have entire teams disband. Never seen it in my life. And if that happens, I think you've got a different problem. So 6 years later, we know that self-selection works. We know that it works in big companies, banks and insurance. We know it works in small companies, in startups, and everything in between. We know it works with people in the same room, and it works for virtual teams or remote teams. And I know that if you try it, it's going to work for you. So let me ask you the same question again. If I walked into your organisation and you had a self-selection, what would you think would happen? Do you think this is going to work for you? Raise your hand if you do. Looks like 80% to me. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for listening. If you want to continue the conversation, then I'll be around for the evening. Contact me on email or LinkedIn, and I'll also be at Agile Open tomorrow. Thank you.